In section 3, we talk about percent, and a percent is a ratio of a number to 100. We usually write these as like 75% or 10% or 60%. But each of these can be expressed as a ratio of a number to 100. It's like 75 over 100, or 10 to 100, or 60 to 100. We could even have a decimal in the numerator, 6.8 over 100, which is 6.8%. What does that equal? That equals 6, and let's convert this to a fraction. 6 8/10. 6 8/10 divided by 100 is, let's do this as 6 4/5 divided by 100 equals 30/5 plus 4/5 divided by 100. So I'm really going the long route to do this, or 34/5 divided by 100, which you could think of as 34/5 divided by, this is like, I could turn this into a fraction, 100 over 1. And if I wanted to get rid of this denominator, I could multiply this whole thing. I could multiply this whole thing by the fraction 1 over 100 times 1 over 100. So this would cancel out, and we end up with 34 over 5 times 1 over 100, which equals 34 over 500. We can reduce that further by dividing top and bottom by 2, and we end up with 17 over 250. So 6.8% is like 17 over 250, or 17 to 250. And if I were to do this division on a calculator, I'd get 0.068. Here's a calculator where I plugged in those numbers. So you can go through that long drawn out process to try to figure out what this decimal is. Or what you could do is you can just start here. If we have 6.8%, then in decimal form, we just divide this by 100. So if we take 6.8 and we divide by 100, we essentially move the decimal point 2 spots this way. So 6.8% is 0.068. 75% is, just move the decimal place twice, 0.75. So on and so forth. 13.25%. Same deal. 0.1325. We just moved the decimal point 2 over. That's how you convert 8% into a decimal. And that's important because when you operate with percents, when you operate on percents, or you take a percent of something, Often when we talk about percents, we use the percentage value, but when we operate on it mathematically, we convert it into a decimal. All right, that's section 4.3. So often we're called on to use percents and do some problem solving. An example of this might be something like 10% of 246 is what? And I find these kind of types of problems quite easy. I don't know if you will, but you might. And one of the reasons is because I use a system to solve problems like this. So whenever you have a word problem involving percents, always write it in the form of, using the term of and is. And when it comes time to turn this into an equation, then, well, the first thing we'll do is we'll convert this to decimal, 0.1. I move the decimal place twice. 1, 2. Convert it to a decimal. 246 we're going to leave in there as just the actual number. For what, I'm going to stick a variable in, call it x. Now what do I do with this of? Well, anytime you see of, think of that as a multiplication. And anytime you see is, think of that as an equal sign. So now I have a regular equation here now. Regular mathematical equation. So 0.1 times 246 equals x, or 24.6 equals x. So 10% of 246 is 24.6. And it's just that simple. Let's do another one. So 75% of 943 is what? Okay, so remember, put the multiplication sign in for of. 943 equals, let's put a variable in here, x. And for 75, I'd put in 0.75. But let's put in the fraction, or the proportion that represents that, 3/4. So 3/4 times 943 equals can't read my notes. Let me just multiply that out real quick. So I get 2829 2829 over 4 equals x. Or this equals 707 1/4. So 3 times 943 is 2829 over 4 equals x, which is 707 1/4, which, if I put that in decimal form, is 707.25. Let's check that real quick with a calculator. 2829 divided by 4 equals 707.25. So all checks out. So 75% of 943 is 707.25 exactly. Okay, one of the reasons I suggest you rewrite the problem in this sort of form here is because sometimes these percent problems, it can be confusing whether you should multiply or divide things. And this is an easy way to set things up. So for example, suppose I have 10% of what is 364. So I'm writing it in the same way, but now look here, x is here now. My is equals always. I've got 364 over here. My variable is not on this, on the end now, like I had up above. And so this is multiplication of and 0.1. So 0.1 times x equals 364. So to solve this problem, then we just simply solve this algebraic problem. And I want to isolate the x on the left. So I have x equals 364 divided by 0.1. So that's the same thing as saying, oops, I'm not going to use the calculator in this. Let's just do this by hand. The same thing as saying 364 divided by 0.1. That's 1/10. So we multiply this by 10 over 1 times 10 over 1. It's like multiplying this by 1. 10 over 1, 10 over 1. So this all cancels out on the bottom. This is 1. And on the top, we get 364 times 10. So my answer is 3640 over 1, which is 3640. So that's just how you might do it by hand if you don't have a calculator handy. So 10% of 3640 is 364, and that makes sense. A tenth of this would mean you just move the decimal place. If this is 10% of something, then we would move the decimal place 1 to the left, to the left, yeah, and you'd end up with 364. So it all makes sense, and that's comforting. Okay, let's do a word problem now. Suppose you paid $4,437 in taxes last year. This was 29% of your income. How much did you make? So, deciding how to set up the equation here can be a little bit confusing, but let's just use that method that I talked about before. Let's set this up into that little question we ask ourselves. So, what are we doing? We want to figure out how much we made. So that is x. How much did you make? That's x. Now, it says that this is 29% of our income. So 29% of x is 4,437, or 0.29 times x equals 4437. So now that we've had this set up, this is easy now. So x equals 4437 divided by 0.29. You can solve this any way you want. Let's just do this quickly this time. We'll use a calculator. And here's the calculation. 15,300 is what I end up with. So we have 15,300. We look over, x is what we made. That's the answer to the problem. Okay, one more. We don't have a lot of time. We'll see how far we can get through it. But 2000 to 2001, NASDAQ declined from 5,000 to 1,600. What is percent of this decline? So again, let's write a little statement here, picking these ideas out. So the decline is what percent of 5,000. So we want to reference this to 5,000. So our decline then it can be determined by figuring out what our actual decline was. 1,600 subtracted from 5,000, which is 3,400. Well, I only have a couple of seconds here before this video is over, and so I just wrote this out. You'll have to go ahead and look this through, but 68% is our decline.